So hi everyone, and thanks for being here, for taking the time. So I think like Marie already gave you like some good input and like why we're doing this today. And I think like especially now it's super relevant that we talk about working remotely and kind of like tips and tricks and like helping each other how we can properly do that, because for a lot of us it is like a big change. I think if you're used to working in the office and then like from one day to the other you're working from home, and I think like on the one hand we think it can be like a huge advantage for teams to work from home. So it's not, we wouldn't say it's a bad thing, definitely not. I think there's a lot of like positive things that we can take from working at home. But one thing that is also important, I think, is that we kind of like look at how we work as like an individual, and that we have like a certain routine, that we have like self-discipline. And yeah, so I think there's like the two sides. There's like the team, so how do we collaborate, and then there's on the other side there's like our own routine that we have at home and that we can establish. But of course it takes some time, and there's like changes that, yeah, it just like affects us differently if we work from home or if we work from the office. So it's just like how do we get into that new routine? And if we look at the team, I think a lot of it is about openness and collaboration. So actually the values that with TFF we try to always like bring across. And I think especially for working remotely, it's super important that we are open and collaborative with each other to just like make working easier for the whole team. So yeah, I mean, before Christine will jump in a minute, and she will share kind of like our key learnings from like our time working as a remote team. And actually TFF has always been a remote team, and I think we've learned a lot in the past, but it's still like it's super interesting to just see how like new tools come in and like how we learn as a team. And it always like changes depending on new team members. And yeah, but it's been a super interesting journey for us, and I think we can say that we have like some expertise in that topic that we would like to share with you. And also I think one thing that I want to mention is that remote work is often seen as, or like when people hear like working remotely, they think like, oh, you're just like sitting on the couch at home, or either that, or that you're working all day and not taking a break. But I think there's, especially now that we like discuss the topic more, I think there is potential that we can, yeah, that working remotely is actually the same thing in that sense as working from an office, but it's just like how do we do it? And there's a lot of like nuances and things that we have to consider to make it as effective and as, but still like not working too much. So yeah, Christine, if you want to dive in with our kind of
Yeah,
like explaining what we've learned.
sure. And like, if you want to throw up the slides at any point, that would be
I
awesome.
will, yeah.
But yeah, just to reiterate Jana's point, like we have kind of been doing this for before it was like the trend, right? So TFF has always been a virtual remote team. And so we've tried it all with, various degrees of success. But I think one of the things that is really important for our TFF community to lean into is the fact that we stand for business as unusual. And so business has a certain perception of like how it needs to be done. And at TFF, everything we're doing is kind of turning that on its head. And the world is now waking up to the fact that, there's a new normal and how work can happen. It can happen from any place. It can happen at any time. You can be super productive if you do it right. And you can bring your personal life in, you know, if you're comfortable. And that can also be something very empowering for your team and your culture. And so I can also just say, like, you know, there is this perception sometimes that, you know, old school bosses might have, like, when they hear remote work, like, oh, you're just sitting on your couch all day. Like, well, maybe you are. Like, I don't have a home office in my apartment. So I have been known to do con calls in my children's bunk bed, and my team has seen me in my kids' bunk bed. And that is okay, because this is, like, again, when you're working from home or you're working in a remote team, like, you need to be comfortable with bringing an element of your personal life into your job. And that is also very powerful, actually. So one of the things that we really have figured out in our years at TFF is that everybody ticks differently. We know that, but it's really important to understand your team's needs and preferences in terms of how they work and how they communicate, so that you can tackle a project effectively. So we swear by a tool that was introduced to us by a productivity hacker called Marissa Brasfield. She works with elite entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley and around the world. And she introduced us to the Kolbe assessment, which you can find online. You have to pay for it, but to us, it's been worth the investment. And we actually make everyone take the Kolbe assessment before, you know, they are offered a job in TFF. And basically, Kolbe assesses your kind of key areas on how you naturally operate when you are striving. So striving is when you're in your flow and you're doing your best work. What are your natural tendencies? So they look at things like your fact finder, your follow through, whether or not you're a quick start, and whether or not you're an implementer. And you can go read what each of those mean, but let me give you a very tangible example of how this works in remote teams. I and our team am a very high fact finder. So it's scaled on a scale of 1 to 10. I'm like a 7 in fact finder. So I need context and data in order to feel comfortable with making decisions. So in the past, with one of my colleagues who was working remotely, he was sending me messages with just bullet points summarizing the key, you know, point. And I was getting so frustrated because I needed information. And what's that bullet point? I needed the context for it. And meanwhile, I was sending him messages with a barrage of information, and he was a low fact finder. And so we realized that a lot of our, like, miscommunication was happening because of our natural tendencies. And once that data was put in front of us about how we are naturally flowing and striving, it was like, oh, it was like this aha moment. And then we could adjust how we were communicating with each other in a way that fit our needs and preferences. And it also just, like, helped us understand, you know, when we want to get things done, especially like under time pressure, or when we haven't had the chance to connect, you know, over the phone, like, this is how you can really help your colleagues work. And so another thing that you can learn from Kolbe is being a quick start or not. And teams of entrepreneurs are typically very high on the quick start. You know, we're action oriented, filled with ideas, jumping around, etc. So if you're building a remote team and you're trying to optimize your work, try to find some people who are higher on the follow through side. You don't want to get someone who's completely, you know, a 1 on quick start, you know, and you're a 10, because you'll never find, you know, a way to work together. But if you can find somebody who is, you know, a medium follow or a high follow through and a medium on quick start to match if you're a high quick start, that is really effective to, again, help optimize process and make sure work gets done. And if you don't have that on your team, if you decide to take Kolbe and you see you're all quick starts, we've actually worked in TFF like that, where we had a team of all 9s on the quick start scale. What we did though was we hired, you know, remote assistants, and we found support systems that would help us. You know, maybe we didn't bring on a full team member, but that would help us, like, follow through and build in the processes and infrastructure we needed. So again, Kolbe is a great tool to understand your team and your individual learning needs and preferences, and working needs and preferences, so that you can, like, optimize and ensure success. We also use StrengthsFinder, which is another one of these assessments that, paired with Kolbe, really gives you a clear picture. So the theory of StrengthsFinder is that you should lean into your strengths versus focusing on your weaknesses. So, this is something we have actually an Excel sheet that has every single person on our team, and it has their Kolbe numbers and their top 5 strengths listed. And we can go back and reference that. And again, optimize projects based on what skill set we need and the ways of working that we need, in a particular project. And so it's a really effective way to turbocharge your team. You don't need, a big expensive HR function like big companies have. You can do this. This is like a way to stay nimble as a, startup team, and be really effective. And we offer on the Digital Labs, actually some, courses on, that help you dive into these. We also can offer access to Marissa and her Ridiculously Efficient group. And of course, there's free tools that you can take online. And Yana has put together, who by the way is a high follow through, has put together a great set of resources that we'll share with you, that you can find some of the free versions of this assessment. So I think the key message here is understand your working needs and preferences, understand how everyone on your team does that, and then optimize, right, how you're working together on key projects and bring in, resources that you need. There's virtual assistants, there's AI assistants, there's all kinds of like process tools that you can build in. And that's actually what Yana is going to take us through now, is how to set up a digital work environment that makes working remotely easy and accessible.
Definitely. So like, as Christine just mentioned, like there's like so many like different ways of working and like different personalities in that sense. And that is, I think, like one of the key messages that we also want to bring across today, that there is no like one fits all solution. Like it's very like you have to kind of like see what works for your team. And I think that's also the case for the tools that you're using. So we've been testing a lot of tools at TFF ourselves. And I think like one thing that I want to mention first is that we always think like don't use too many tools. So like test some tools, like try and like see what works, and then select those that really like that make you more efficient as a team, and don't use too many tools just for the sake of using them. I think it's like really like seeing what works for you and then selecting those tools. I want to go through a couple of tools that we think are amazing and that work for us and make us more efficient as a team. So one thing obviously is Slack, and I know you're using that as well. So Slack is just very good for like daily communication, to share updates, to just communicate with the team. And I think that's like communicate work-related stuff, but it's also more for like connecting and like team bonding. So you can set up like different channels for different purposes. So for example, we can have a communications channel where we only talk about things that are related to communications or to other projects. But we can also have channels that are more for like the team bonding side. So like where we share our lunches or things that we've been up to on the weekend. So there's like different ways how you can use Slack, but it's the main communications tool that we use, and it works very well because you have it on the desktop, you have it on your phone, and you can just like easily access it at any time. Another communications tool that we use is obviously email. So email is it's good for like external communication, so communication that you send out to like partners or to just like in general like people who you work with, but it's also like sometimes good for internal communication if you have more like long updates for the team, or if you want to communicate between team and like external. So I think email, everyone is familiar with that. But yeah, it's another communication tool that we use, and I think everyone uses. Apart from that, I think it's important to have something where you can share and collaborate on documents. So we use like the Google products. So that's like Google Documents, Google Spreadsheets, Google Slides. So it's just, yeah, I think you need something where you can share and work together on the things you're working on. So it's usually documents. And Google products are, I think they are very like collaborative in the way they're set up. So you can leave comments, you can suggest things. So I think it's just it's a fast way and an easy way for teams to work together. And yeah, I think like for us, it's been very helpful to also like set up a clear structure with the folders. So you have, for example, you have a yearly folder, and then within that you have like different folders for again, like for communications, or for let's say now for the TFF challenge, for the finalists, you can have like separate folders. And that's just an easy way to to like organize things and for people to find it as well. Like if I create a new document and I put it in the right folder, then Christine knows where to find it. And that's very helpful, obviously, if you're working remotely and kind of like rely on that. Another thing which I find very important is a shared calendar. So we use Google Calendar. And I think that's just useful because because you can see what people are up to, and again, like you have insight into their daily schedule, and that helps to work together. But I don't want to spend too much time on like all of the tools, because there's so many out there. There's project management tools. There's like for another way of communication, Zoom, which is obviously great to like see the faces and like talk to each other. Some teams also use WhatsApp. So there's so many tools that we can use. And again, what I want to leave you with here is test the tools and like see what works for you, and then select the ones which you think are necessary and make you more efficient.
And just to build on that, I want to say like pivot quickly. Like we have definitely like taken the free version of a particular tool and tried it out. When it doesn't work, we just stop and move to the next one. And then we also like find different ways of working within our team. We're a very small core team, but like for a subset of team members, Trello as a project management board is working really well. It does not work for me. So they use Trello for their projects and then like update me as necessary, right, on certain aspects. So just, there might be tools that some members of your team use, and there might be ones that you all use. I definitely think Slack is like, it's funny, I was on a call last week and the people had never heard of Slack. So I'm thinking that you all do because you're entrepreneurs, but it's definitely, I think, worthwhile investment. We use it, just as Yana said, for our culture is built like on Slack. So we share Giphies, we communicate in a very informal, fun way. When people do things that we love, we, send an emoji. We've actually personalized emojis. So there's like ones of like my face and Yana's face that you can like add under a comment, like silly photos. It just like adds so much like energy to our day. There's that like parrot head that spins, Slack is just, it brings the fun right into a collaborative remote culture. The other thing I just want to say though, is like, we're not trying to paint a picture that this is easy, because these tools are messy. And like, I personally know there's been days when I'm talking to the same person on WhatsApp, Slack, Facebook Messenger, and Skype. And then I'm like, wait, where did that thing go? So that goes to Yana's point that she made earlier about like putting in place personal processes too. So one of the things that I personally do with Slack is I have my own, Christine channel that only I can see. And that's where I'll copy and paste, messages from different platforms I'm using there to remind myself. And we also have set up, because we're all so busy, we've set up a to-dos channel. And if you have the chance to read the book, The Checklist Manifesto, I recommend it. By the way, you can get the summary on Blinkist, and we offer a discount code to Blinkist on our digital labs. But basically the summary of the Checklist Manifesto is like, live by checklist, make a checklist for everything. It really helps. And so we have the to-dos channel on Slack, which is just that checklist that we can check in on and see what needs to be done, and everyone can populate it with, activity and a timeline. Which segues me to, and a couple of other things, they'll be in the resource, but like GitHub, right? If you want to share data and code, and, Google resources we found have been really great. But there's, let us know too, maybe you have some like great hacks that we can all learn from.
And Christine, just quickly jumping in here, for like the personal work environment and like the notes taking that Christine just mentioned, I think because we're always thinking digital, but we also have I personally also have like my normal like paper notebook, and I think for me it works like to have a mix of both. And actually Christine gave all of our team members, she gave us this paper notebook at the beginning of the year, and I think it works really well. So not only look at digital tools, but also like what you can use like in very traditional way.
Yeah, the analog and digital come together. And it's funny because I just find it so ironic that the one year I bought a yearly planner, not only for myself, but the whole team, was this year, where all of our plans gone out the window. But that's okay, because actually the book is really good about structuring how you plan, not only with like what you're doing hourly, but also with reflecting at the end of the day and at the beginning of the day, setting your priorities and reflecting back. And that's kind of what we wanted to get into a little bit now, is about, as Jana said, like having these personal work environment, right, where we're hacking like Slack to send messages, setting up, Post-its on our screens, having our, analog planner next to us, also putting in place processes like, Jana mentioned about the importance of sending emails, but how you title those emails so they're searchable is super important. You have to also be diligent about making sure that you change the subject of your email when you're in a chain, so it's clear if there's an action that's needed, if feedback is needed, or if you're changing topics completely, because I think we're all just like inundated with information. We tried to like memify our presentation here, which we'll share afterwards. And then what we wanted to talk about too was just a little bit of the digital culture we set up with our remote team. So we're going to share like what worked for us. Maybe it will inspire you, but we'd love your ideas too. So, we're a team that's basically based in Europe, although, through the years we've been in all of the time zones that you can imagine. And what we have really set up is that we do weekly check-ins multiple times a week with a clear purpose. So on Monday morning, every Monday, we check in with an informal chat. How was your weekend? What are you working on this week? We keep it light. We try to laugh and set the week off right. Wednesday is our working call. That's the midweek, hour-long call. Everyone gives an update. We have an agenda that we set. We send a Google Doc the day before. People populate what they want to talk about, and each person kind of rotates giving an update and also addressing, key topics for that week that we need to dive deep on. And then we have, of course, our, happy hours and our regular just communication that we have between each other or as teams. We have, social media calls, communication calls, design calls, team calls, like related to the finalists, etc. So there, we are on the phone a lot, and we try to use, video as much as possible, just to keep it like, again, more personal and bring that element into remote working. We sometimes even just do calls where we're like, we'll have lunch together or try to, before my kids interrupt. We have templates and reporting structures. So, we have a couple of people in our team that are really good at setting out, templates that then help us all, report to each other and share progress, etc. Dashboards, I think, is like the business term for it. We do collective goal setting, and we also, do kind of retrospectives, and we openly share when things are not working, right? And like I said, we end those fast. The other thing that helps, which of course we can't deal with right now, is that we try to meet in person once a quarter. But I think, like, again, if you set time remotely to meet for a deep dive, half day, 1 day session, if you can get your team, to digitally connect, to do that kind of like once a quarter big strategy session, that helps. And then you can have this cadence for like the weekly sessions. That's been very effective for our team. And the other message in this section is like, don't overdo the process. Don't get people scared about like, oh my God, I didn't fill in my template, what's going to happen to me? Those tools are there to help you and, to facilitate conversations. So you don't want to paralyze activity. And we've actually had that happen before, where people spent way too much time on the reporting side versus the action side. And when you're a small startup, that's totally not the equation that you want to be, standing for. So you want to flip it to being action focused and, really have those tools there to support and keep you going, forward. And the other thing is like consider time zones. So we try to be fair to where people are in the world and not make, one person always have to get up early or one person always have to work late. And we try to like, break that up. So yeah, that's our tips and tricks for process.
Exactly. And I think like if the process is in place, and like one goal of the process should always be to kind of like influence the culture and to build the culture of your startup, of your team, because team culture is so important. That's kind of like the spirit of your team. That's why you are here together, why you're working on your project. So everything that we just mentioned, the tools, the processes, everything should support your team culture and ensure that you have a team culture and that you can nurture it with those tools. So like, as I just said, like team culture, that is kind of like the values, that is why you're doing what you're doing, so your purpose. And I think that also goes to leadership. So kind of like the CEO or the founder of your startup should always like think about, okay, what is our shared purpose? Like, why are we here? And like, how can I lead my team with a lot of compassion, with a lot of like just like always that purpose in mind, and ensuring that the team is on the same path and like working for the same goals. And that is especially important for remote teams, because you don't see each other that often, or maybe you don't see each other at all. Like in the current situation, you don't see each other at all. So I think it's important that we make sure that we have the same understanding of our goals, and also use the tools that we have to support that.
Exactly. And so we wanted to talk a little bit in the last section, or the last two sections, about mental health a little bit. So this is something that we have to take very seriously in this climate, where there's a lot of like external negativity, scary things happening in the world. And also, even if that wasn't existing, we're entrepreneurs. And this is like a roller coaster that we've signed up for. It's exhilaratingly fun when it's going well, and it's so difficult when it's not. And so we definitely take seriously, kind of finding that flow and that vibe, and making sure that we're there to support each other. I feel like it's important when you're an entrepreneur to recognize it's a lifestyle, not a job, right? So it's important that you're also carving out time to safeguard your mental health. So try not to work from bed every day, even if it's tempting. Get up, take that shower. I was very excited that this call was happening today because I said I can put on makeup, which I haven't done in a few weeks. Build small rewards into your day. Take a break, have a coffee, meditate, do yoga. In my case, I have a little mini dance party. I blast some music and dance and burn some energy, but carve out time to make sure that you're focusing on your own, health and energy. Set boundaries for yourself. I actually have a hard time personally turning off because I'm so obsessed with, TFF and the teams, etc. And so I really do have to make sure that I'm like, okay, I need to take an hour, to focus on my kids and eat dinner with my family and not be checking my phone, especially when you're getting pings from all different time zones. It can really be something that takes over and consumes your life. So make sure that you set boundaries. If you need to communicate those boundaries clearly, especially if you're a small team, just so you say to your other team members, look, I'm going out tonight. I won't be available, but I'll be back tomorrow, or whatever the case may be. Just transparency is always really helpful to manage concerns. And then when there are, problems, make sure that you express those to your boss, to your team members, etc. That also helps with mental health for yourself and for your team. And then, track your achievements, not just your to-do lists. Make sure that you are celebrating when things happen that go well, and vocalize that, if you can, to your team. Just focus on, again, having this culture where you're celebrating each other, but also not being afraid to be radically transparent when things aren't going well, so that you're not missing opportunities by being, what I mean, because you're not seeing that person to talk about challenges. You need to be even more open in a virtual environment. And also accept that you can't have the same productivity levels every day. There are just some days that you aren't going to be super productive, but as an entrepreneur, you're going to more than compensate for it on the days that you're in the flow. So ride that, it's the roller coaster, it's a ride, it's a lifestyle, and don't worry about it. If you're passionate and committed, you're going to get it done, and you're going to rally your team to help. And we added one last slide here, which was about remote work for scientists, because there's a lot of people here, we're talking about kind of the startup remote team vibe that we lead in TFF, but there's a lot of you who are actually doing research-based startups that require lab time, etc. And we've been really interested to hear from you in the surveys, and the conversations you had with Jana about some of the ways you're able to find solutions in this current environment by setting up DIY labs in your houses or, close to home, by actually having, cloud labs and more automated research paradigms. But we'd love to hear from you about some of the tips and tricks, besides those that I just mentioned, of how to work remotely when you're doing science that does sometimes require physical presence. So yeah, that's our presentation, and we'll open it up to questions and conversation, and also would love to hear your feedback, in general. And like I said, there's a list of resources that we'll be sharing with you around each of those topics, from, personal process to culture to productivity hacks, etc., that we will be sharing. So ask away.
Perfect. Thanks, Christine. So yeah, if anyone has questions, anything that we maybe didn't explain that well, or if there's anything that you're kind of struggling with, or that you've been thinking about now that you are working from home, feel free to share or to ask. We're happy to jump in.
Yeah, I have a question in terms of how to work in different time zones. Well, at the moment, in our case, to be honest, we are not that bad because we are only 1 hour ahead or difference in this moment. But I will be very interested to know, how do you meet, or how sometimes work? Because if I say, oh, we should do this, and then the other person can only respond 5 hours later or something like that. And then how we organize all that time zone. And as well, like for example, I have some other collaborations in Mexico that is a lot of time. So every time that I send an email, takes 1 day for them to read it, and then another day for them to answer to me. So that is why it's never going like so well with social
yeah. So question on that particular challenge. The person that you're collaborating with in Mexico, can you get them on WhatsApp?
Well, it's funny because for us WhatsApp is not very formal, so it's kind of like a more for friends and all the stuff. So maybe that is why we haven't find a way, because well I'm talking about another professors or something like that they will never give you their phone number. So it's normally just by email. So that is why it's
yeah, definitely we face that problem. And one of the ways, actually, even informal conversations, we've migrated some of those to WhatsApp to facilitate more instant connections. So I don't know the specific person you're talking to, but if you felt comfortable, that is one way to overcome, because emails do have a tendency to be, acted on less quickly, right? And then another suggestion that comes to mind is, again, I've had to learn this. Marissa, the woman I mentioned earlier, gave me some really great tips and tricks to make it really easy to act on an email. So now when I write my emails and it's something that I need a decision on quickly, I title the email "Decision Needed." Then I put, all I need is a yes or no. Then I put the question I'm asking underneath, so that the person doesn't need to feel compelled to write a long answer back to me, kind of thing. I just try to take out all of the thinking there or stuff that would encumber them from responding right away, right? So, and putting in time frames, etc., also helps. Of course, it all depends. Like if this is a new contact or someone who's very formal and old-fashioned, you might just have to accept that that's going to be the way it works. But if it's somebody that you feel like I can, be comfortable with saying, like, I need you to act by 5 p.m. today, and all I need is you to reply yes or no, and here's the data behind it that helps you to make that decision. That can help a lot. And that was a tip I learned, like I said, from Marissa, who works with these elite entrepreneurs who are getting, questions from every angle, every minute of the day. So it's just how can you make it easier for them to help you? Okay. It's a little bit how you have to foster the communication with them.
Yeah.
And I think also one thing, if it's someone actually from your team or someone you work with a lot, because we also had team members based in the US, or not, because now we're quite most of the team are based in Europe. But if it's really someone you work with a lot, I think just making sure that you make the most out of those hours that you have together, because it's usually quite a limited time frame. So if you try to make most of those hours and really collaborate on those 3 or 4 hours that you have every day, I think that is also something that we learned as a team.
So Utsav asked a great question in the slides about how to obtain nonverbal cues from somebody who you don't see regularly. And again, I'll just jump in and Jana build on this, but it's I feel like this is the next gen way of working that, we have to make the norm in business. So business will tell you, don't ever add emojis or exclamation points or wink faces. But we find that's one of the best things to do when you can't see someone, is get them to understand what your mood is by putting a smiley face at the end or an exclamation point. Or if you're angry, just say angry face or whatever the case may be. But those are the kinds of things why emojis exist, right? Is to help with those nonverbal cues and to foster easier, digital communication, because a lot can get misinterpreted when you're sending a text message. So another tip and trick that we use is WhatsApp voice messages. I so wish Slack had that integration, but it's so non-intrusive, but it's as good as a phone call, right? You can just send a little 30-second message to your team members. They hear your voice. They understand the subtle cues. So we use that a lot in our team. And it also just helps to riff. At least for me, when I have an idea, I like to play it out with somebody. And so I just send a WhatsApp voice message, and it's just me kind of but like, again, it's not like bothering somebody with a call. You don't have to pick up. They can listen to it at their time. And what we also do is when we send those messages, we'll send a written note underneath that's like urgent, listen now, or hey, when you have time, check back to this. So there's little like things that you can try out. And another thing that comes to mind here is like when you're bringing on board a new member, how you can make this easy for them. Because as a remote team, like we've certainly gotten a bit more comfortable, working together over the months. But maybe Marie, you can speak a little bit to like how maybe you jumped into the team, because you're our newest member, right? Like, and you got pretty on with our ways of working quickly. So like, what do you think worked and didn't in terms of your onboarding?
Sure. So in terms of the onboarding, so I joined TFF, like Christine said, most recently. And so I'd met half the team in person before, but without working for TFF. I just met them kind of as friends. I was volunteering before I was an ambassador for TFF. And so that was nice because I already knew some of the people like in person. So that made a difference. But for example, Christine, I'd never met and then just started working. And I think, yeah, it's definitely the calls that help. So this Monday morning call that Christine mentioned, where we just chat, and I realized we can be open about it. We can talk about how silly our weekend was, and that's fine. And I think also everybody's open about it. So it's not, we very quickly realized there's no top-down thing. Like we're all just sharing. When things go bad, we all just share about it. It's fine. And I think what's also helped is that there is the constant, oh, how are you doing? So sometimes we don't need to have a call during the week because we're all working quite like parallel, but we will still have it. Someone will still call me and just be like, oh, how are you today? Mm-hmm. And that's something that's hugely helpful, that at first I was always a bit taken aback that someone would just call to see how I am. But that's actually something that's really nice because you use those 5 minutes to just see how the day is going and to have that personal touch, and then you move on. Mm-hmm. And that for me, it was a change also from working in an office where I had 15 people around me, and we would take coffee breaks, we would have meetings, and suddenly I was just by myself in my kitchen. And so these like check-ins are just really nice. And then even if it was a work call, you have the first time, and it's okay to use those 5 minutes to just not talk work. Mm-hmm. And then you launch into it. Whereas I think when you're in a work environment, when you're actually with the people, you don't use that time for chit chat because you're like, no, we are here for this meeting, and so we get that done. And I think that's a huge help. And then, I mean, for me, it's been said, but also in Slack, like the use of the emojis is just really nice. Like, and sharing happy things as well as silly things. And it doesn't take long to add a little bobbing parrot to a message. But it means that someone's read it and that we're all kind of laughing and giggling together, even though we're not together. So I think it's the personal touch that really makes it like a team.
Andreas is making a really good point about too, like GitHub has some really, really great like processes, etc. I used to work for a startup in Boston, and like Slack was a different experience there than it is in the TFF team because we were working with a lot of like coders and digital tech people. And, maybe the comfort level with certain personalities isn't as strong to like go super open on chats, and this type of thing. So it's really finding your unique startup culture and making these tools and processes work for you in an authentic way. And when they don't work, like don't force people, you know what I mean? To like have, whatever, an open sharing conversation on Slack if they're not comfortable with it, but like make sure that everyone understands, what your culture is and how to like live true to it. And then Kayao made a great point on here.
Can I quickly jump in before we go to Kaya's question? Because we also had a question regarding customer service. So if it's not like remote work, but with customers and not with the team, like how do we make sure that like the environment is satisfying for both sides? And I think that's also like back to Marie's point to like not make it transactional, but also like have the human side of it. Mm-hmm. So like try to use like if it's 5 minutes that you have with to like talk about like private like personal things and not only like work related, and then just like try to extend it a little bit and really build that connection and that relationship.
And just like opening up. So I was on like a series of virtual meetings last week that lasted for three days, and they were 4 hours each day. And it was very long. And it was a big, large global group, and we didn't know each other. And I do have to say that I feel like there was an element missing from these conversations where we were all brand new people trying to get a lot of work done over a very long period on the phone. But like, there wasn't really the chance to like, get past the high level stuff because none of us were breaking down barriers. So I do think in this particular, you know, I hate this word, but unprecedented times that we're in, we have to try out new things to break down barriers of communication and to have the types of conversations that otherwise would be held in person. So we have to try it digitally and try new ways to open up with each other, including with customers right now. And we can also share some digital marketing tools that we have that are allowing for like video integration. There's all kinds of cool stuff happening right now. And I would also implore you to try, if it is culturally relevant, to be more informal in your communications in today's world. Just try it. Try asking if you can connect on WhatsApp versus email. Try jumping on a FaceTime versus a normal conference call or whatever. But these times call for new ways of working. And as next gen leaders, it's up to us to kind of show what can be done to build authentic online experiences that can lead to tangible impact. That's like what I'm really exploring on the daily. And I would love to implore you to do the same so that we can solve these problems, you know what I mean, in the way that we know best. And Kaio asked a great question. And again, it fits to this specific moment in time, which is basically like, how can you work most effectively over the past week? He says he's tried exercising before lunch to split the morning and the afternoon, and it really worked for him. And I think that's great. I think definitely like setting up some type of structure so that, you know, you are having a little bit of free time. You're maybe, you know, you don't have the time to commute to work to listen to music. So instead go on a walk, you know, listen to it on your headphones. I listen to my podcast every night before I go to bed. I also, because I have children, and I'm guessing most of you aren't in that situation, but there's just times in the day when I can't work. So like, then I go back in the evening after they're asleep and, you know, log back on and get through my stuff. That's my quiet time. But everybody find the cadence that works for you in this very strange situation that we're in. But I think like I said, the new normal is not going to be a 9-to-5 job. It's not going to be for entrepreneurs, that's for sure. So like, this is a great time to experiment with all kinds of new ways of working and normalize them. But we are an ag, which is also a 24/7 job, and food.
No, but I completely agree. Like the routine is kind of like what we need. And that's, yeah, it's like for everyone it's different. And I feel like I've said it a lot already on this call, but try like find what works for you. And there's like, I mean, what Kaio mentioned, to kind of like split the day into 2 parts. I think that's a good idea. Utsaf was asking what if we have any tips if like we see as a leader that we're losing the team spirit. I think that's a very good question, and kind of like my first reaction to that would be that again, like try to maybe like put work aside and like try to bring the team together in a virtual space. And I would like say like Zoom or like some sort of call where you can see each other. I think that's important that you have the video on, that you can openly talk to each other. And I think openness is kind of like the key word here. So try to connect with your team in a like not work related way, and address your kind of like your thoughts, and like that you feel that you're losing the team spirit, and then like talk openly about it.
And I just want to share that like at TFF, we get you guys more than you may even realize. We're a startup, you know, even though we've have a little bit of a longer history, but we still are very much like a startup. And we also are like a very mission-driven and passion-driven organization. And so like I'm a founder, I consider myself. So I know what you all are experiencing, when it's like, this is your passion, it's your life, you're responsible for your team, you know, all of this. And then come these like seismic shocks from the external world, and, you know, you feel lost and uncertain, and so does your team, because you can't rally them together. So what do you do in these moments? And that's where I want you all to feel comfortable also coming to Thought for Food. We're not just here to accelerate your startup and help you develop a pitch deck and an IP strategy and a business model, but also to help you like find the support system you need. And one of the things that I'm also trying to do is check in on my team, also give them space. It's very hard for me, but like I also recognize that part of the way to empower my team right now is to say, like, if you're having a bad day or feeling this is too heavy, like take some space. Offer coaching where possible. And maybe it's not something you can afford in your cash flow situation, but there are coaches that are open to bartering. I think that's going to be a new trend, by the way, for startups, is to enter into these kind of like bartering arrangements with all kinds of, you know, service related, you know, transactions. And so it's something like, you know, like, yeah, just empower your team, not just by like reminding them that you have an important job to do and we're in this, but also empower them by helping them personally develop and connect with coaches and have headspace, have the time to have their social lives, etc. But like, I also get, because I'm a founder too, like it's really stressful right now. And you think like, oh my God, like the world is collapsing and I just want my startup and my organization to prevail. We have to work harder than ever, but actually, again, unprecedented times call for unprecedented, you know, ways of working, and lean on us at TFF. Lean on external support systems, not just your team, and also lean on your team. If that makes sense. But you know what I mean.
Yeah. And so Mark is asking, how do we get people onto like a new platform? So like he refers to like shifting from WhatsApp to Slack. I think, like, speaking from our experience, Slack doesn't work for everyone. And what we found is that it depends like on kind of like the culture and like what you're used to, and like the region. So I think it definitely doesn't work for everyone, and I wouldn't like say push on it if you feel like it doesn't work, and if you've tried it and people seem to be more open and communicative on WhatsApp, then maybe that's your channel. Maybe you shouldn't use Slack. So yeah, if you really feel like it doesn't work for your team, then like try to use another platform that seems more direct and more natural for your team members.
And we go back and forth. Like we'll sometimes put really quick and informal messages on WhatsApp and then like say, oh, I sent you a WhatsApp on Slack. But I mean, you got to do what you got to do to make sure your message gets noticed. But yeah, it can be like, I'm part of probably 8 different Slack overarching channels, and then within each Slack channel are like all of the topic channels, etc. So it can get very overwhelming. We don't want to position Slack as like the be all end all answer. You also have to be diligent in how you use it. I find it most effective with just our TFF core team, and WhatsApp actually is my go-to for communicating with external parties, including customers and partners, etc. But again, you just have to try it, Marcella, to your point at the beginning, like, and see if they're open to it. But I mean, I don't know about Mexico, but like in my experience with Asia and places like this, like it's almost the default to go straight to WhatsApp. And I've even struggled with what picture should I have on WhatsApp, because you got to look business and it's like your person, I don't know. Modern struggles. I think we made a Digital Labs course about that, actually, how to take the perfect selfie.
We did, yeah. I see that Mame is raising her hand. Mame, I don't know if you still have a question. Hi.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear us, Mame?
There's one question in the Q&A as well.
Was I moving? I did.
So I'll read that out, but Mame, please feel free to write your question in the chat. So Benon is asking, in regards to customer service, how do we get to hit customer satisfaction in remotely working environments?
Good question. I guess it depends. I I think that, how do you measure customer satisfaction? I mean, I guess there's a lot of tools and surveys. Maybe others have, who are, because we don't necessarily, you guys are our customers. So we don't necessarily have the same as like selling a product to, a customer. Does anybody who's in our panel have any tips for like customer satisfaction while working remotely? Measuring it, quantifying it? No.
Well, the only thing that I can, like, it's coming to my mind is like a survey, but that is quite, I don't know, annoying, but no, to be honest.
Well, one thing we forgot to mention is one of the cool things about Slack that is built into the concept of this is that you can spy on conversations. So the channels, even if you're not actively participating in them, can be open so you can watch people converse. So if you moved your customers, for example, onto a Slack channel, if you're working with growers, for example, and, or a WhatsApp group, if you can be part, even not actively engaging, but watching their conversations, it's a great way to get qualitative data besides just what comes back to you in a survey. And you can start to see like unmet needs, etc. So it's, I definitely very much enjoy spying on conversations I'm not part of in our core team channel, because it gives me just insight into what's happening in the organization and what people are thinking about and talking about and working on. So I do recommend that in WhatsApp and Slack, and, join groups, and, even if you don't have time to actively engage in them, you can like go back and read through them and monitor them. And that's a great way to gauge customer satisfaction and your team satisfaction for that matter. Yeah. I hope that addresses your question, Benon. Cool. Thanks, Kayao. He's jumping to another call. Bianca. Yes, that's a great point. She's saying that it's important to create a communication channel with a customer. Absolutely. And, look at data like the number of requests, the critical and positive comments, etc., that come in, through various channels, whether that be email, social media, if you have a landing page on your website and more. Great. And that's what, just going to like what Bianca just raised here is something we want to foster more of, and we're working on that very actively at the moment, is how to create this peer-to-peer support system within TFF so that you all are sharing with each other your tips, tricks, learning, and experiences in the real challenges that you're facing. Because even though you're working on different projects in different parts of the world, you're all focused on building food system solutions, and you're all in like generally the same phase of your startup journey. And there's a lot of applicable and shareable, very relevant lessons. So we want to foster this ecosystem, this network of like collaboration that will accelerate the speed and impact of all of our efforts, reduce duplicative efforts, and just make this, really work. So we're not all making the same mistakes, and we're all doing things, in a collaborative way. So let's do more of that. Thanks, Bianca. Oh, Lucas to make instant call and sharing screens, even with sharing mouse point of the guest to point things on host. Cool. Lucas, you'll have to take us through that. Part of the sharing culture. If you guys have any, tips, bring them back to us. And yeah, is there anything else that, in the last minute or two you want us to talk about or cover?
Just quickly want to come back to Mame. So Mame, your audio is on if you want to ask a question.
Yeah, no, sorry, I actually made a mistake. I'm sticking to
No worries, no worries.
Yeah, but it's been a great
well, I think the point is
session. I've really learned a lot of opportunities to join, share something.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Anna Rosa, who put in the chat that she works with a beekeepers network, so sometimes it's hard for me to, keep people, motivated from so far away. I think that's a challenge we all face. And so I think it's a relentless job, and you have to keep trying different ways to do that. Understand what motivates people. So we've tried, for example, in TFF, again, just in the spirit of openness, we tried incentive-based structures, earn points, cash them in for whatever perk. We've tried also, kind of building more of a culture that is, based on like the mission, and all of these things have had various levels of success. But I think like trying things out with your beekeepers is, and seeing what works and sticks, and, individualizing where necessary is the way to go. Oh, Lucas is asking about Trello.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that, Lucas. I think I personally think Trello is great, but it's like, I feel the same. We've had like multiple projects where we started like working with Trello, and then we didn't really kind of like stick with it. So I think, yeah, again, I would say if it makes your work more complicated, then leave it. Sometimes like the analog notebook is just better. So yeah.
Yeah, and if it's not working, don't keep trying. Like I haven't looked at Trello in 2 years, and
yeah.
I know some people use it, but like I'm just like I can't look at another tool. I love Ingrid's question. So if it's okay, if you feel free to drop off if you have to, but I'd love to take this one. But it's, how do you as a team work through periods where all team members are busy with daytime jobs? Because maybe, you're in the early stages of your startup and you're not all full-time committed to it. And that is so something that we deal with at TFF. And we also, have people who like good, take long, like periods of time where they take a vacation or something like this, right? And so how do you deal with this? And so one of the things that we do, which I think has worked really well, is we basically, like if somebody's taking an extended period of time where they can't focus on this, they basically lay out like a document with like all of the, goals and objectives and the process, right? So anybody can pick that up. If we need to bring in, if it's a key part of the project, somebody can pick that up and take it forward. We try to like outsource too in a cost-effective way. So we use Fiverr a lot, and some of these things that are time consuming, but like aren't necessarily things that our team member, if they were working full-time jobs, would have the time to do. And then I think the other thing is, and this is where I see a lot of entrepreneurial teams having problems, right? Is if there's like, and this can get really ugly when you get an investment and you're trying to like split up, who's getting what, etc. If you outline from the beginning how much time is expected from people, and get really clear on, if it's like 1 day a week or whatever, and you're not measuring it based on if they literally are sitting there 1 day a week, but like what is the output that they're expected to have and the time commitment they're putting in, etc. Like what is important in this like upfront contract that you're having with them, so that you can successfully navigate, competing priorities. Because the last thing you want to do as an entrepreneurial team is get in a fight with your team members, right? About I'm doing more than you and da da da, because you're there to like make an impact, right? So yeah, that's a tough one, but I think, we're all like doing side hustles, and so I think just contracting up front with your team and being really open about what time you have available, what you can take on is important, outsource where necessary, and when you do have to take long periods of time off, make sure that you like, what's the word I'm looking for, off ramp, right? Or like basically build something that somebody can step in and take over, so it's an easy and seamless transition. And also, we were talking about this earlier, I think if there's one thing that this moment in time has also taught us is the importance of contingency planning. So quick starts, going back to Cold Bay, have a hard time putting in place processes, and you're kind of always like in activation mode, but like now is the time to think through like what happens if you if somebody quits, right? Like on the fly, or, somebody doesn't come to work the next day, like what's your contingency plan for all of this? And, cause yeah, it's a very real situation we could all face from one day to the next. And if you don't have that infrastructure in place, it can break you. The letter from the CEO of Sequoia Capital is a great thing to read right now. I reread it last night. Good.
Perfect, cool.
Thanks, Jimmy. Yes. Okay. Oh yeah, Asana, Notion, I think everything's there. So everyone, please share back with us. And thanks, Ingrid. And feel free, if you want to set up any like bilaterals with anyone on the team to dive into any of the topics you care about further, let us know. Thank you so much for joining.
No, thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Nice.
Yeah, and so the call has been recorded. It's going to be made available with notes and links on the Digital Labs. And we'll share that link with you on our channels as well, so you won't miss it. And if you do, just email us and we'll send it to you happily. Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks for joining.
Bye.
Bye. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Acabou?